Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube segment, I'm going to be talking about identity crisis. I'm going to delve into this in a few different ways, perhaps seeing different forms of this as far as an identity crisis. And I think some people just, a lot of times they get out of touch, obviously, with who they are. I mean, there's so many different forms when we talk about identity crisis. I mean, sometimes what happens is you'll have these people online that'll impersonate other people. And sometimes I think what happens is they actually, maybe when they do this, I think a lot of that's a reflection on the fact that they're insecure with who they are as people. I think sometimes somebody wants to impersonate somebody famous online because they just don't really, maybe they don't love themselves enough. A lot of times I understand it's done for fraudulent reasons, or to get, maybe it's to get something out of the other person, maybe whether it's attention or what have you. But again, a lot of this goes back, I believe, to really not really fully loving oneself in many instances. I've been involved. I'm strongly suspicious of somebody that had been that's impersonating somebody. I'm very strongly suspicious, somebody famous, and I know this goes on a lot. Sometimes people will do this when they impersonate somebody online. I think sometimes it's to get at it could be to get at that celebrity that they're impersonating, because sometimes what will happen is that person that is impersonating somebody famous, pretending to be a celebrity, they will say something derogatory to somebody, and they'll get that person to think that that celebrity actually said. I remember one time there was a case, some of you may have heard about it, former prolific NBA player Shaquille O'Neal, aka Shaq. There's one time somebody was pretending to be him on a social media site. And what happened was the fake Shaquille O'Neal said something, made a derogatory remark to another person, and online, and that person that had the negative, that was had to deal with that negative statement from the fake Shaquille O'Neal, confronted the real Shaquille O'Neal about it and said, I ought to punch you in the face, or something similar to that. And Shaquille O'Neal was flabbergasted and couldn't understand what was going on. Well, the thing about it is, we have, and I think a lot of this, again, and not to be overly redundant with this, people, but a lot of this goes back to people just not being content with who they are. A lot of it has to do with being insecure with who the person is. And it's just a shame that you do have people out there that are like that. And the thing about it too is, when we have, identity crisis, it's even, the subject is more deeper than just simply go, and as far as the example I'm using about people going online and trying to impersonate someone else, the thing about it is, sometimes you'll have people that will act more important than who they are. They'll boast about things they don't have. They'll act like they have this. You have people that will go around. They'll try to seem real in person. They might be honest as far as the fundamentals about, basics about themselves, as far as their name and their birth date or what have you. But they may try to either put on airs, or they'll act like they have certain credentials, whether it's former schooling, higher education, or their work life, or they'll act like they're more prosperous or more affluent than they really are, in order, say a guy, for example, in order to impress a woman. These are things, and it goes back, I call it, to the big I word, the insecurity in others, where a lot of this is connected with. And the thing about it is, people at one point, at some point or another, people that act like this, what I call, when I say they're guilty of, when they're involved in what I call an identity crisis, they have to confront themselves at some point, and they have to face up to what they are, and understand who they truly are. what happens is when people start to do this, they actually become, I mean, a lot of people don't realize this, and for whatever reasons, whether they're deluding themselves or it's self-deception, they don't think what they're doing is that wrong, but it's still fraudulent. It's even fraudulent when I think, even though it might not be punishable by law, when somebody when acts in a manner that doesn't correspond or correlate with their true character, their true personality, in order to impress other people. To say, for example, that they were part of some, they played, somebody goes around saying they played minor league baseball to somebody, again, in order to impress a prospective girlfriend, something like that. Those are, people have to remember to try to emphasize and accentuate the positive in themselves and to be who they are. A lot of people are just insecure and they're afraid to be exactly who they are. The thing about me is that, you know, a lot of people say they're real people, and I know you feel so, a lot of people are fallacious. They're not really, when they say, because they're not, they may not be real. I would like to consider myself a pretty real person. I live a very humble existence. I wouldn't want to say impoverished conditions, but I'm at least a borderline poverty level income. I don't flaunt or boast about things that I don't have. I'm just very real. I mean, yes, I faced repercussions for probably for being honest, and but the thing about it is, I feel better within myself for being honest and being true to myself, and not to pretend that I have something that I don't. And when I say I face certain repercussions for this, well, here's the thing: uh, if I was to go online, if I was to lie and say I was making a lot more money than I did, say, if I was going on an online dating site, maybe I could have landed a woman in my life. Although at the same time, you have to remember, people that do something like that and they distort their income level online, eventually you will get found out in most cases. And I like to just, I feel like, for me, being honest is the best thing. I have a conscience. I think a lot of people do have a conscience. It's just a matter of whether they're really going to use it or not, and they're going to act on it. That's really what it comes down to, a lot. And I think what it is too is, when we talk about, when I talk about identity crisis, it's some people, another way to perceive this in some cases. I think another example of somebody having an identity crisis is not really living up, or owning up to their own transgressions, their flaws, their shortcomings. It's the people, I don't know if you want to say, it could be narcissistic qualities in some cases, or behavior. It's the people that will go around and they'll act a certain way. They'll treat even their friends in a way that is just simply not good. And then they try to rationalize their own behavior later on. They'll say, "Oh, that was because he's my friend. Oh, he said something that made me blow up." And the person might have just constructively disagreed with him or her, and then the other person blows up and tries to justify the action. They'll say, "You see what you made me do?" It's things like, and what they do is, in doing so, they're not even owning up to their own flaws, their shortcomings, and their defaults, and their own character, and their own personality. It's like, I mean, you'll see some people also. What hurts me is those people that put on that veil and that facade when they hide behind their religion. I can remember there was somebody I had been acquainted with one time, and she would get off the bus and one time, and she'd say, "God bless." And the same person basically took a good amount of money from me and really didn't make any effort to ever return it. When I confronted her about just not, I don't even know if it was about that, just the fact that I felt like she was detaching herself from me as a friend, she subsequently blocked me. So you have people like that as well, that put on their pretense, and they act like They put on their scrupulous front and that they act like they're very ethical when the reality is that they're not. And the funny thing is, these people, a lot of these people think that they fool people, and they may fool people. They might, it's kind of like, what does it say? You could fool some of the people some of the time, but you can't fool all the people all the time. The reality is, you might be able to fool some people, and you might be able to keep it going with them, but you're not going to fool everybody, and eventually most people are going to find out what you're about, and that's really going to bring, it's really going to bring you down. And what happens is people will actually respect others more that will be true to themselves, instead of like saying, pretending to be all holy and all spiritual. If you're not, just being yourself as a person, I think will often reap more rewards than not. And it's great if you actually are a spiritual person, but if it's actually true and you're not just putting on this front just to impress others, or just to be able to win favor with others. So anyway, people, well, that'll conclude this YouTube segment. Until next time, people, Edwin Learnard saying, stay well.